Hi, and welcome back to the channel again. And what I want to talk to you about today is in the slicers. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I've got a blacksmithy building that we started off with about 3 or 4, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. And it was one of our first buildings. And we haven't really printed that building since we had the old printers, or had a need to because we had a lot of stock, let's say. So we ran out of stock, and I went through the inventory, and I realized now I need to print out some more blacksmithies, especially the building. Now, I didn't do flat printing on that one specifically because I thought it was small enough that I could keep the dogleg siding on there as a full building, and what I did. I really am not going to redesign it, but I probably should, because the truth is flat printing even for that small of a building would work also. But in this case, it works. If the building works, I'm not going to really mess around with it. The reason I'm bringing this up is on the slicer, because I put the building in from the old files and the old printer. I didn't have the bed leveling auto technique on it. I think it's an SV3 Creality, and the first one was like a Ender 3 Plus or something when I made the files for it, and that would have been an early version of Cura, the slicer. Well, when I went to go print it on the new printer, and I print it slow, I don't print it fast, because I want the detail, it failed. The print basically just spaghettied out. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Then I went ahead and opened it back up in the slicer and realized that the old file with the newer updated slicer, which is 5.8, which is working for me, wasn't working on those newer printers. I needed to update that file, so I went back into the file, sliced it in the newer 5.8 version of Cura, and it printed fine. So there is something I learned from that, like if you want to reverse engineer it, let's say, is that it wasn't in the print that failed that made it was a mistake, because it was spaghettied out. I mean, it really went halfway up and it's just spaghettied out. It was everywhere. But it was in the fact that I was using an old file, old slicer technology, probably about 2 years ago, with an older printer that was made for that printed fine back then. Now I have these newer printers, and now I'm trying to get the same results. And it's not the printer's fault, it's not the slicer's fault, and it's not my fault. It's just a matter of fact that I needed to update the file. So I learned something that I want to pass on to you that you should learn too. It's not always in your design. It's not always in your slicer. It may just be a simple fact that you had an old file on there that you use an older printer style with, and you got a newer printer, and you're taking that same file, trying to print it with a newer printer, say an auto bed leveling printer like the V3 is, which I love, by the way, from Creality. It's a fantastic printer. I got 6 of them, 5 of them actually. One's an S1024. But anyway, so that's what I wanted to share with you with. Now here's something else I wanted to share with you also too, and I'm going to show you this in a video after this. I'm in the shop right now. I'm going to go upstairs and do like a ice cream recording of it. But that post office that I've been made, and it has all that really nice detail in it and the brickwork and stuff like that, I was slicing that in 5.8. And the guy who bought them wanted them a little bit smaller, so I went ahead and pushed it to, I think it was, like I said, 10%, like I did in the last video, like I showed you, resizing the prints. I think that was that video. Anyway, I took and I decided, okay, let's see what happens if I got an update from Cura. It says, update to the latest version, 5.10 beta testing version. I thought, okay, let's try it. So I went ahead and took that same file and I put it in the slicer, and you know what happened? That new update made all the windows thicker, 2 lines. It made all that brickwork disappear and made it solid. It just totally destroyed that print and all the design with it. It just basically, the upgrade, whatever they did and whatever their beta testing did not work for me. So I also want you to understand too, it may not necessarily be in your design, it may not be in your printer, there's a lot of things you need to look for. It could very well be in the fact that the update from the newer companies, say you were doing a Prusa, or say you were doing Chit2 box, I guess that's another type of slicer for resin printers and stuff. You can do FDM, I guess, with that. But it's not necessarily the design and everything that all of a sudden it failed. It was in the fact that they updated it and all that stuff just disappeared. I went back into 5.8 and then all the lines came back and all the detail came back. And so I learned something too, that updates aren't always the rev. They're not always going to be the solution to every problem. And maybe you're creating the problem by doing the update. So my suggestion to you is, if it works, leave it alone. Don't mess with it. What you see is what you get. And that's what they call WSIG or whatever in the computer term. So if it works for you now and you got your new printers with the AutoBed Living and you're working in 5.8 or 5.7 or whatever your old slicer is, I use Cura, like I said, Ultimaker, and it works, don't change it. Don't go for something always better. And then when it does fail, reverse engineer it and then find out, okay, take it step by step. You know, when you solve a problem, especially when you're in engineering, you don't attack the entire situation. You take it step by step. Okay, where do we mess up on this? And then you recreate it. And then if it doesn't fail, then you figure, okay, let's go further back. And each step along the way, as you reverse engineer, you understand where it could have failed. If you just went ahead and said, I'm just going to just get a whole new slicer, I'm going to get a whole new printer, everything's failing, I give up, that's it, and I'm not going to take the time to be patient with this and understand it, you're not going to succeed. You're not going to get the prints that you want. And you're not going to be able to be successful in your printing because you're going to get frustrated. So my suggestion to you is step back, see what worked before, and see why it's not working now, and then take each step of the way, whether look in the slicer, look in the old firmware of your designs from old files, look in your printer settings. I mean, there's a lot to variables to these prints, and once you get it, lock it in. And then if I do go to like a resin printer or go to another printer, I'm going to have to do all these steps all over again. But that's what's the beauty of the problem solving, is you reverse engineer and you look at each step along the way, and then you say, okay, this worked and this didn't. Risk and failure. Elon Musk does that a lot with his spaceships, I guess. You have a lot of failures, but when you get that one success, you concentrate on that. So that would be my tip for you on this week about the printing. Don't blame the slicer. Don't blame the design. It could be a simple thing as you're just using an old file on a brand new printer, and that's why it could have failed. So I went back and fixed my problem, and maybe this will help you in the future with your problem. It's not always in the bed leveling. It's not always in the bed adhesion. It could be just a simple thing as a bad file or an older file not working with a newer software. So that would be my tip for you on this. And like I said, always test your prints. Another thing I wanted to bring up that I thought about is on the overhang. Now, when I was printing this Blacksmithy with 5.8 and I put the overhang at 59%, the lower you have your overhang, the less you're going to have support on it, let's say. I found out that every little dog leg on the siding was getting support. That's my fault. That wasn't the printer's fault. That wasn't the slicer's fault. So when I go ahead and put that printer in and I did a test on it and examined it and then sliced it down and then took my lines down with that little line, I realized, hey, I did something wrong here. All of a sudden I got a lot of support where I don't need it. I went back and changed the setting. I think it's higher. I can't remember right now. I think it's higher, then there's less support, and there's lower number, and then, or maybe it's the other way around. I can't remember. Anyway, I went the other direction and I got my dog legs without any support to print perfect. So that's another thing you need to look at. So you may need to understand your slicer and realize it's just not push button type printing yet. We're not there. But if you take the time to take all the steps and look at all the engineering involved and all the what ifs, you're going to be successful in what you do. So hopefully this gets you guys who do 3D printed model buildings, things for your trains, bodies, whatever, are going to get you on a better track to understand how your printer works, how your slicer works, and then you'll have more success in what you're doing in your buildings. So that's my tip for this week. Thank you. Please like, subscribe, and share. I'll go do that ice cream for you now and mix that in. So I brought up the Blacksmithy to show you This is in 5.8. Now, this is not about the update. This is about showing you on the overhang on the support. So this is set to its default levels, okay? Everything's showing you there, and I'll show you the support. And you see it's all defaulted out 59%, okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and slice this and give you a preview. Now, you see all that dogleg overhang? That's because of the overhang, because of the supports. All I want to do is have the windows supported and the door, and the rest be printed normal, and because it always printed normal before like that. Now watch what happens when I change those settings. Okay, you can also see the orange, in this case anyway, that's the overhang. Now watch what happens when I go higher. It says there, the minimum angle of overhang for within support is added. 0 overhangs are not supported. 90% will not provide any support. So I did go higher. So I went to 70. Now watch what happens. I'll slice it, preview it, and see, that's what I want. And I know that these overhangs are big enough that they'll catch and they'll be fine, and the building will look good. So that's my point, is that it's not necessarily in the print. It's the same print. It's just in changing a couple settings like that, like the overhang pattern and understanding my slicer. And like I said before, not necessarily using all the new updates, but using what works. And now I have the file that's going to work, and I know that's going to slice, and the print building's going to work. Now, I do argue for flat printing. This is before I even got into flat printing, is when I built this. And it works, but I don't want to change it. So that's what I told you before. So that's your example. And now we'll get back into the rest of the video. And then thank you for the comments, and thank you for your support. Like I said, we're almost there to where I get 415 subscribers now. And we're even getting some feedback on the Torah Science channel too, which is really cool. So keep following me. Hopefully the algorithm will keep pushing this way. Follow my wife, follow her store. She's got some new designs in there already. She's got some new ideas, and she's doing really, really good with it. I think you'd really enjoy working with her. She's got some really nice buildings that she's putting out that I'm designing for her anyway. And we got some new tools coming that way too. So blessings to you, and thank you for watching me on this channel to this week. Bye.